Hi everyone, how are you today? I hope you're having a great weekend and I hope that everything is lovely. Um, that was a silly thing to say, but I do hope that. So anyways, I just want to check in kind of like I do with what's happening going forward. And I know this last week we did conception, pregnancy, and childbirth, and there was some really great posts and some really important shares that I'm thankful for, that people are feeling safe enough to talk about things that are hard. And I'm glad that it feels like a safe space. And yeah, and so going on to next week or the week that you're in right now, you're talking about other things that are also difficult to talk about. So I'm hoping that things are going okay in those forums. I haven't peeked in yet, but I will. Um, so I wanted to kind of check in terms of then what's coming next, because the last two topics, kind of pregnancy and then preventing pregnancy, have to do with obviously our bodies and our bodies reproducing, and then how that is socially constructed based on our ages. Obviously, at certain ages we can reproduce, and at other ages we cannot. Um, the post that I'm asking you to ponder is kind of going back to what it's like to be a teenager. And what I'm asking you to do is to look at um, the argument about teens and contraception and sex ed, and think of it in terms of, like, if I were to ask you, what is a good idea for teenagers to learn? Should they be taught sex ed in an open way where they learn about everything like pregnancy and abortion and how to prevent pregnancy, and even maybe like what sex feels like, what's an orgasm, how to feel pleasure, those kinds of things? Or should we teach teenagers that sex is bad while they're teenagers and that it should be saved until they're older? And in some cases, depending on the program, when you're married, right? So, what kind of education do you think is appropriate for teenagers to get? Many of you are teenagers yourself or recently were teenagers, and what kind of education did you get? How was it? So, I'm going to ask you to argue the position that you don't agree with, and I'm not sure how that's going to look on the posts. We'll have to see. Uh, Historically, it's been different depending on the group of students I have. But sometimes, so this is my secret agenda to get us to kind of learn from people we wouldn't normally learn from, like people we adamantly disagree with. I don't think we do enough of that as a culture, and this might be why we're in such a strange place as a country that we're in. But so I'm going to ask you to argue the opposite viewpoint of what you really believe and try to sell it, right? Try to sell it. So if you're a debater, you probably are pretty good at this. But if you're not, this might be something that you struggle with. So you'll see what it looks like. So this is obviously will be next week, right? We're still wrapping up this week. But based on this week's information and the week before's information, and a lot of stuff actually we've talked about all semester in terms of like sex education and what's good for kids to learn, that's how you're going to frame this. And if you're interested in paying attention to anything in the popular media, right now the Fremont City Schools are having huge debates about a sex ed program that some parents find to be much too informative and much too, I guess you could say, like, encouraging of sex, but I think that's their perspective because I have not seen the curriculum. But there's like there's a school board event. I mean, it's become very big. So that might be worth Googling and figuring out what's going on because we don't really have a good answer about sex education, I don't think culturally. And I don't know that less is more for teenagers. I actually have different ideas about that. But anyways, it's an interesting topic, right? I mean, maybe this whole semester you've thought about this stuff just because you're in the class, but like, what does our society kind of indicate by the way we respond to things like sex education? And yet there's so much contradiction in terms of like what we consider to be popular culture and how, it's complicated, right? It's just complicated. So anyways, I invite you to go to town on this post, and I like this. I like this topic, so it's an interesting. I always like to read what you guys say. So, all right. Well, happy almost May, and I will see you guys on the forums. And thank you for all you're doing.